Yeah, gotta love,
It looks like
I love technology.
we're in business and we are recording. So, hey, Tim, thanks for jumping on this experiment with me. And just by a quick way of introduction, I guess we've known each other just actually a few months, even though we have mutual connections that go back several years. So,
Yeah.
you work for Leadership Network, and your communications guru, wear many hats, but just fill myself in and others in on what you do.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. Thanks for inviting me to be your guinea pig and be a part of these conversations. So it'll be good. Yeah. So Leadership Network, just to give you just a bit of background of what we do. We work primarily with large churches across North America to help their pastors and to help their teams accelerate progress toward the mission that God has given them, to take some strategic leaps in the things that they're trying to do to reach their community, to develop their people, and to deploy them for the kingdom. And so, we've done that in a variety of ways over the last, 34, 35 years. But the primary way we do that is through groups. And we develop experiences that help pastors learn from each other, learn from some outside voices who can speak in their situation, and develop some next steps for what they're going to do to move forward. And so my role in Leadership Network is a couple of primary things. One is, as you mentioned, marketing communication. And so trying to help our organization communicate clearly and effectively to the people that we serve. And then the other side of my work is primarily in the experience design and facilitation. And so when we are bringing a group of pastors or bringing a group of teams together for one of our year-long groups that we put together, how are we going to use that time? How are we going to accomplish the goals that we have for the group and that the pastors and teams have for themselves and their church throughout these three gatherings that they're going to be a part of? And so I get to work with the teams that think strategically about how we use that time and then to actually facilitate and pull those off.
Cool. So in your experience, y'all are working with innovative churches that are looking to grow and oftentimes just push the margins in terms of how do we reach people for Jesus. Maybe on a linear scale question, 1 to 10, how effective are these organizations when they come to you in terms of their communication and where they're currently at?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most of the churches that we work with, we invite them to be a part of these groups because they're doing something right, because they've got some things figured out, because we believe that a lot of the learning takes place when you get the right people in the room. And so these are leaders, these are teams that are doing some things well, because we want them to be able to learn from each other and what they're doing well. A lot of these churches, the leaders are incredible communicators. So when you're talking about platform communication, these are men and women that are great communicators. They're great leaders. And so, by and large, they're doing a pretty good job at communication, internal communication. What we are finding, especially as we're working with one of the new initiatives that we're working with, is leveraging data to help churches connect with people in their community, to help them to grow and to multiply the people that they have in their church. And we're finding that even the biggest, the leading, the most entrepreneurial leaders in churches are struggling with some of that external communication about getting the right message to the right person at the right time. And so, in what we call our engagement accelerator, which is where we're leveraging big data to help churches attract and keep, grow, and multiply people better for the kingdom. We're finding there's a lot of learning that's taking place because they're just not, churches just aren't as adept at leveraging data to be able to get that right message to the right person at the right time. So we're seeing a lot of growth in that area.
So when you're working with these churches, are you inviting them, or are these invites only all the churches that you'll work with in 2019, or can a church reach out to y'all that needs help?
Yeah, so in these groups, yes, kind of to both. We do have an interview and application process, because one of the things that we found over the last 3+ decades is that the experience for the churches in the room, a lot of it is dependent on having the right mix of churches together. And so, for some of these things, and it varies by topic, if we're doing a multi-site group, for instance, and we have a bunch of churches that are a part of that group that are over 10,000 and have, 8 to 15 or more campuses, to put a church of 3,000 that has 3 campuses in that group, they're going to feel really out of place. And the flip side is true. If we've got a group where most of the churches are 3,000 to 5,000 and they're, 3 to 5 campuses, and you bring in a church of 20,000 that has 12 campuses, they're going to feel like the odd man out. And so we're very intentional about who we put together in a group, because it makes a huge difference in the overall experience for the people in the room. Now, so when we're looking to bring a group together, it's a little bit of a both and. Some of it is we're looking to churches that we've connected with either in the past, or someone that is in one of our groups says, hey, here's a church that would be great for this next accelerator, or here's a pastor that would be great for this next leader group that you're a part of. Reach out to them. And so we're doing some of that. But also, we get contacts all the time from churches that have read one of our blog posts, or maybe they've picked up one of the books that we've published, or they've attended a webinar or some other online event, and they say, hey, we're really trying to figure out how to launch our next 5 campuses, or we're really trying to figure out how to develop that executive level leader from within our church. And so we'd love to talk to you about your leadership development accelerator. And so it's a little bit of a both and. What we don't find ourselves doing a lot is bringing into that environment churches that are really, really struggling with something, and they're needing to fix some kind of core internal stuff. That's not typically the church that is going to fit for this type of experience.
Yeah. So in your many hats that you wear, where do you find yourself thriving the most?
I think the most fun I have is in the experience design and facilitation, where we can take some goals, we can take some objectives that we have for a group of churches that are going to spend a year together, and say, okay, how can we most effectively and creatively help these churches achieve these goals? Because every group that we have is unique, because every group of churches that come together have a unique set of goals and objectives that they're trying to reach that are specific to their mission that God has given them. And so every time we do, and even if it's the same topic and we're bringing in some of the same resources, it's a new experience because the people that are in the room are new. And so that's exciting. And one of the things that we're doing with our accelerators that we're finding is a lot of fun is we're leveraging outside resources from other domains, Christian executive level leaders who are leading multinational organizations, who have spent a lot of time and energy figuring some things out that the church can really benefit from. And so we're able to give these teams and give these leaders access to people that they normally wouldn't get access to. We're able to invite them into an environment where these leaders are kind of pulling the curtain back a little bit and saying, hey, here's what we've figured out about things. And so teams are able to learn from that and say, okay, what does this mean for us? What does this mean for our church? How can we take some of these ideas and see what's going to fit with what God is calling us to do. And so for me, that's fun to be able to design and facilitate those experiences and watch the teams learn and grow throughout the year that they spend together.
So in that work, if you could identify, say 3 common threads in the churches that when you're working with them over the given 12 months or 18 months that you may have one of these groups and cohorts, what are common threads in the churches that start ratcheting things up in terms of communication, their leadership? How do they actually begin to have traction in the work that you all are doing? I know every context is different, but are there 3 themes that you often see throughout these groups, organizations?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, and I think a lot of people would be surprised, I could rattle off a list of very large, very well-known, very influential churches that we work with. And I think most people would assume that they're very closed-minded, that they've got their way of doing things, and that's really all that they're interested in. But one of the qualities, one of the characteristics that we see in the churches that are very successful in these environments is that they're open to collaboration. They want to be in the room with other leaders who can push them, who can challenge them, who can help them think differently about the things that we're doing. And so for me, that's really exciting to see these churches that, everybody else is going to their conference to learn how they do things. Right. We get guys in the room together and they're pushing on each other and they're challenging these ideas and they're saying, hey, have you thought about this? Or what about that? And they're open, they're very receptive to that, leaning into one another and challenging each other and holding each other accountable. And so that desire for collaboration is huge. And, historically in the church, we've not been really great collaborators. And I think if the church is going to survive and thrive in the years ahead, the church is going to have to become much more collaborative. Leaders are going to have to become much more collaborative in order to overcome the challenges of how fast our culture and our environment is changing. And I think alongside that is an entrepreneurial spirit. They're willing to dig in and try new things and test new things. And that's one of the things that we're actually trying to bring into the way churches work. Because typically churches, they get an idea, they fall in love with that idea, and they invest a lot of time, energy, and resources into that idea. And man, I don't know how many of these, kind of silver bullet ideas that either never make it to implementation because they recognize after they spent months and months and all this money that, our assumptions were wrong. This is not going to work. Or they push through and they implement it because they've invested so much into it that they can't turn away from it. And it's, it just fails. It's a disaster. And so we're really helping churches figure out how can we rapidly test new ideas, validate some of the assumptions we have about our people, validate assumptions about the people in our community, validate assumptions about, us as a church and what we do best, and test these along the way and learn from that before we go in and invest a lot of time, energy, and resources to it. And so you've got to have a different mindset as a leader. And to the communication point, you've got to be really good at communicating well what you're doing and your intention and what outcomes you're looking for with your team and with your church if you're going to be testing new ideas, because that's typically not what we do. Typically when we bring something to the church, there's this underlying assumption that this is going to be the next big idea and failure is not an option. And we're trying to help churches and leaders recognize that, hey, failure can be your friend. If you're learning from some things and you're testing and some things don't work out, but you've got the opportunity to pivot from that and try something else because you haven't invested everything in it. it makes a world of difference in what churches are able to do and how fast and nimble that they can become, which is also something that's not a typical characteristic of the church, being fast and nimble.
So I'm going to have a question just about our own tribe that we've kind of grown up within in a minute. But what has brought you some of the greatest joy recently, creating these environments for churches to grow and thrive and market and communicate, and ultimately to bring more people to Jesus? What's been one of the most joyful moments or one of the most innovative ideas that have seen that's actually good?
Yeah, the one that's most fresh on my mind, we just took our one of our multi-site accelerators to Fiat Chrysler headquarters in Detroit, and we had an amazing 3 days with a lot of their high-level leaders talking about everything from how they take concepts and do design and testing and that kind of stuff to how they develop leaders internally and the succession plan that they have for every one of their employees and how they move people up the chain and give them new opportunities to develop and grow. But one of the things that was the most fascinating presentations to me was their one of their executive marketing and brand leaders there. And they talked about the journey that Fiat Chrysler has been on since the bankruptcy to today, since Fiat took them over and to where they are today. And they're probably one of the best, most creative branding and marketing and communication car companies, automotive companies that's out there. And, being that communication is a big part of what I do, being able to hear a lot of kind of behind the scenes of how they developed a lot of their ideas and concepts for how they promote their brand and how they sell their products. It was great. And it was so, I feel like it was so on point for churches because we're communicating with the community. We tend to focus on what we have to offer.
Right.
Focus on features. And so we're pushing our features, and every church is pushing their features. And if we step back and look at it, we're all pushing the same stuff. We're all pushing the same courses and festivals and events, and we've all got we've all got the best worship, and we've all got the best student ministry, and we've all got the best kids ministry. And one of the things that really came through in that presentation was how they don't focus on features at all. And when they do talk about features, it's in a very, very creative and kind of backdoor way. But what they really focus on is connecting their brand personality with the different personas, the different people that they're trying to reach. And they really talk more about kind of the aspirational but the aspirational view that people have of themselves. This is who I want to become. This is kind of to borrow from if you've read Donald Miller's Building a Story brand. He talks about helping the customer be the hero of their own story. And so, as a brand, they're helping people see themselves and see this kind of aspirational future that they have of themselves through the products that they sell. And it's making a powerful connection between people and product. And I think churches can learn a lot from that because we have the greatest brand story in the world to communicate to people. And we focus less on trying to push features and more on helping people see their aspirational future, help see themselves, and how can we join in with their story to help them become who God is calling them to be. So it was, as you can tell, I was really excited about the presentation, and I think it's something that churches can learn a lot from.
Kind of sounds similar to one of the churches here in McKinney that I can think of. that they're just really hinged on this idea of helping people discover their purpose, and leveraging how do we help this unique person, this unique family discover their purpose that may serve outside the context of a church gathering, but this person is actually more alive and more abundant in the name of Jesus Christ, versus this notion of how do we get people here to the latest, Halloween festival? How do we get them here to our Easter, gathering? And those are great things, but marketing has definitely changed.
Well, and I would say, I think it really comes down to, and this is true for any type of communication, whether it's to, a direct report in your organization, on your team, whether it's to the people in your church or whether it's to the people in your community, you've got to know your audience. We can't help match people to what it is that God is calling them to, no matter where they are in that journey. Right. If we know them intimately. And that's one of the things that Fiat Chrysler is really focused on. They know who their target market is, inside and out. And I think a lot of times as a church, we don't take the time to know the people in our community. We don't take the time to really know the people in our pews or on our teams. And so we send out a lot of broad blanket messages to people that are largely ineffective. And so I think, anything, if there was any takeaway from our conversation today, I would just encourage leaders to really take a deep look at how well do we know the people that we're trying to reach, that we're trying to get into our church, that we're trying to keep and grow and ultimately multiply. How well do we really know them? And how well are we aligning our messaging and communication with what we know about them and what we believe that God is calling them to?
How many out of the churches that you're working with, or maybe even the one that you just finished talking about, how many are utilizing different Facebook pixels or tracking mechanisms to do this target marketing? Right? I'll be talking about a mattress with my wife, and then all of a sudden the next morning on Facebook, I see mattress advertisements. I'm like, how is all this working? But there's magic behind all this. So are you seeing churches use some of this magic, some of these pixels tracking codes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that that's being done in particularly in our engagement accelerator, where they're focused. Part of the focus is on the people in their community, but also part of the focus is on the people that are already in their pews that God has already entrusted with. So how can we know them better to match them? And that's really what it's about. That kind of stuff can get a little bit creepy if you don't do it right. And so we try and help churches and the people that we bring in that speak to these leaders, try and help them do it in a way that's not creepy. And so, but there's a lot of that they're experimenting with and running some different tests. But it's not just the tracking pixel stuff. It's not just the people who are already coming, because they've got to come to some level. They've got to engage with the website, or they've got to engage with something in order for that remarketing, that retargeting to work. But what third-party data is allowing these church leaders to do is to create a profile of the people that are most engaged with their church, and then create a lookalike audience for people in their community that match some of those same characteristics, and then be very targeted in the messaging that they're sending them. So for instance, instead of sending out 10,000 postcards to a zip code, they may send out 3,000 postcards to the homes that most closely match the characteristics of the people that are already engaging with their church, that they have a unique ability to reach. And much higher return on that type of stuff than more of this kind of megaphone blanket marketing that they're doing. And there's a lot of cool stories about experiments that churches have done that have yielded just kind of some crazy results to see.
So I love the local church and all of its many, many, many expressions. I'm a champion for all of them to win. but the reality is the tension and the tribe that we have grown up in are not typically the churches that you're working with. And so how do you have a heartbeat for the local church and the church that you attend and still wrestle with this idea that we have such a long ways to go for some churches that are more in crisis mode, they're in stuck mode, they're in help mode. How do you wrestle with that on an individual, personal, family, spiritual formation level?
Yeah, I had a conversation recently with another guy in the Metroplex here who works with a lot of our tribe, and a lot of the work that they do is with churches that are struggling.
Right.
They've got a leadership mess. They've got some kind of underlying foundational issue that is preventing their church from being healthy and growing. Personally, I don't feel equipped and gifted in that area. There's some guys that are just fantastic about wading into the mire and the muck that churches deal with and being able to help them move toward a position of health. And so, what I personally have tried to do is connect with those guys that are doing that and see how I can be a resource to them. And with this particular individual I was talking with, they're trying to integrate some more proactive type stuff within our tribe and within the churches that they work with. So it's not just crisis care, but it is more of, really kind of proactive, kind of similar to the stuff that we do with these large churches. Giving them the opportunity to have a vision for their future and learn from other churches and other people, and to make some positive steps forward. And so, for me, being able to be connected with guys that are working at that level and trying to help churches move out of that, that helps me to do that. Plus, I'm connected, with our church. I'm constantly telling the leadership, hey, listen, if there's anything that I can do, if there's a resource, or if there's something I can provide for you guys that connects with something that you're working on, let me do that. A church that I used to serve on staff with years ago, I've done a lot of their strategic planning retreats over the years. And so being able to still pour into that church and help expose them to some of the things that we're seeing that churches are doing. Those are some of the things that I do to try and continue to invest back in our tribe and be connected with some of those churches. To do more, but haven't figured out what makes sense and what's the best way to break into. There's some organizations out there that are doing some great things with churches, but they're a little bit guarded and cautious about who they'll bring in and the kinds of ideas they want to expose churches to. And so just being sensitive to that and trying to be available if there's an opportunity that makes sense to be able to to speak in or be a resource.
So since targeting two audiences within this video cast, podcast, whatever this actually turns out to be, many times there's men and leaders in our 40, 50, 60 hour week. We're helping someone grow, right? But how do you ensure, Tim, like back on the home front, that you're helping your marriage thrive as well? Because you're creating all these environments for other people to grow. But what are you doing at home that's working, or maybe what are you thinking about trying to do for 2019 for your spouse?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think probably like most of us, we all feel like we could do more. We all feel like we could do better. I think the two most constant, most consistent things that that I've really tried to focus on. One is, and it goes back to our conversation about communication, about knowing the audience. And so, knowing my wife, knowing her love language, and trying to do some things that that speak to that connect with that. And so, for my wife, and I feel like there's kind of some irony in this, but it's words of communication. I mean, that's her love language, words of encouragement. I'm sorry, for a communications guy, personal communication, one-on-one communication. I'm a bit of an introvert, and I'm a typical guy who likes to kind of charge in and solve problems and be efficient and expedient. And so I've got to really be intentional about the things that I do. So whether it's just staying in touch throughout the day via text message, or doing some things that I can do to try and be more encouraging and a better communicator, listening, not trying to solve, things like that. Being self-aware of where my shortcomings are in connection to the things that she needs, and trying to be very intentional about overcoming those. We in fact, we just started one for Advent. We YouVersion Bible reading program together, and so that gives us an opportunity, whether we're in the same room or not. If I'm away at an event, we can be reading the same things, thinking about the same things, commenting on those in the app, reading each other's comments. And I think that's vitally important. One of the things that we've done better in the past, with a senior in high school this year and an eighth grader, we've kind of fallen off of our regular date nights. But I think that's been one of the things. Just spending time together, having fun, has been one of the biggest things that when we've been on point with that, it's made the biggest difference. Because and the people that might be listening know, there's so much pressure, and time is so precious in what we do. There's so many demands on our time and our focus, that just being real intentional, and even if it's sometimes date night has been grabbing fast food and going to Walmart and getting some stuff that we needed, but we did it together. We enjoyed that, and it gave us a chance to disconnect from all the other stuff going on, to talk and just be together. And that makes such a huge difference. So, that's one of the things for 2019 that I want to get back to, is being really intentional and regular about the time that we spend together away from everything else, even if it's, just doing something stupid. Just doing something stupid together makes a big difference.
That's cool. So if people wanted to reach out with you and connect on the social interwebs out there, how do they find you and Leadership Network?
Yeah, so me, typically Tim.Nations or Tim Nations on most any social platform will find me if they want to reach out that way, or Tim.Nations at LeadNet, LeadNet.org, which is also the URL of the Leadership Network website. You can find me, Google me. I'll pop up somewhere. I would love to connect. I mean, a lot of the in-person stuff that we do, is typically for larger churches, but we have a lot of free resources and books and things that are available to anybody. We'll do some online conferences and online events in 2019 that are for anybody and are great resources as well. And one of the things I just love doing is connecting with leaders and helping connect them to someone else. Because what I'll tell folks is, hey, ask me anything. I may not know the answer, but chances are I probably spoke with someone in the last week or so who does, and I'd love to make a connection. And so if there's anything that I can do to be a resource to people who are listening in, man, just reach out to me. And I probably won't know the answer, but I know 2 or 3 people that do know the answer, and would love to make a connection.
Well, I'm excited to see with Ron leading the Helmet Leadership Network. I can tell the surveys that you are doing, changes have already shifted, but I can already tell that things are coming for 2019. So our blessing, it's been a blessing as well. I guess when we had lunch together several months ago, you connected me to somebody up in the other North Texas part that we're in. And so thank you for your time and blessings to you. And let's grab another hamburger soon.
Yeah, sounds good, Lance. Thanks for having me on, and just blessings on the ministry that you have to so many leaders.
Thank you, Tim.